So I think that digital marketing may be about to die, which keeps me up at night and terrifies me a bit. Let's set the scene. I'm a very technical SEO, very technical background. I dabble with servers and PHP and JavaScript, etc. However, over the last couple of years, and especially more recently since I joined Distilled, I've found that I spend a lot of time doing strategy and helping brands work out how they win markets and change their businesses and grow consumer bases and do inbound stuff, etc., etc. In order to deploy a good strategy, I think that you need to understand the landscape that you're playing in. You can't just decide, here is my strategy, because there are a lot of internal and external forces and pressures that shape that, that means some things aren't feasible, that means you might be short on resources, don't have capabilities, etc., etc. Increasingly, that landscape is shaped in turn by the strategies of brands like Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and Apple. You can't set a strategy based on your understanding of the landscape without understanding their strategies, because otherwise you're going to deploy tactics and ideas that aren't going to work, that aren't going to make sense. If you can't predict that things like AMP might not stay around forever, or that LinkedIn at some point might try and make a move on the career space, for example, you maybe risk deploying strategies that don't live for the long term. So I've spent the last couple of years becoming a kind of amateur futurologist and trying to stitch all of this together. So in this incredibly pixelated photo, I don't know what's happened there, you can just about make out me talking about a kind of dystopian apocalyptic future at a great event in Amsterdam. So I've done a lot of this, and I've looked at every moving part of what Google, Facebook, Apple, Tesla, all of the big brands are doing in the digital environment, and trying to see what the implications are for us and our strategies. I'll give you the 30-second highlights. Essentially, Amazon have already won digital. They have gone from being the place where you go to buy your things to servicing every conceivable thing in a box that you might want, to have that readily available to deliver to your home in under an hour, to going even further to being the service which underpins and is the backbone of every type of infrastructure there is. They started with AWS to power the world's internet, which was no small feat. Now they are deploying Whole Foods as the world's largest real-time A/B testing platform for retail. They won't stop there. They want a slice of every industry and type of commerce. That's a pretty big deal. Also of interest, any minute now about 1 billion more people are going to come online for the first time. High-fidelity broadband will be made available in developing countries and economies through things like Tesla's broadband network and Facebook's Aquila project and Google Balloons, all of which are about to come into fruition. Interestingly, when you consider that a large amount of these people will be entrepreneurs, consider the most successful and disruptive businesses in our space, the Ubers, the Airbnbs. These are brands that don't own things, they don't have things, they don't make things. They're just ideas. And these people in these economies will be massively motivated to deploy those kinds of ideas into our economies. Any minute now, millions of people will come up with new ideas and new apps and new platforms. That's pretty scary. Because it won't happen on conventional websites. These people won't build big e-commerce platforms and big Magento sites and big publishing sites. It will happen in apps and WeChat, on eBay, and in bits of Amazon as individual resellers and sellers. The content that they produce and the kind of apps and services and retail they produce will be distributed into places where we're not necessarily very comfortable marketing. Simultaneously, 3D and 4D, and in fact even 4D liquid printing are becoming things which will essentially reduce the production cost of most things to pretty much nil. And when you consider that Amazon already owns the 3D printing marketplace, that this stuff will be readily available in urban areas for collection. That's a photo of the Makers Cafe in London. It's a real place. You go and you order a cappuccino and a 3D printed thing whilst you drink your cappuccino. It prints, etc., etc. The cost of stuff will radically diminish. Then similarly, because of all these new people moving into our economies and all the readily availableness of stuff, that doesn't sound good, does it? Will happen in marketplaces like eBay, like Etsy, like Folksy. These will be the places that we go to transact and buy things which are cheaper and better than we do commercially at the moment. And then all of this happens in new interfaces that we don't really understand yet and don't have a plan for. And then intelligent personal assistants like Apple Siri, Alexa, all of these things will change the way that we shop and consume, and will all be made redundant because we don't really have anything to offer to, when systems powered by machine learning and AI take over all our jobs. So, the future is great and exciting and wibbly-wobbly, but tomorrow really scares me because all of this stuff is happening now, and we are fundamentally unprepared for how to deal with it all. I think, in fact, we may be screwed. So I'm going to run through what's keeping me awake at night, what I'm concerned about. I'm going to go very, very fast, even faster than this, because there's lots to get through. I'm concerned that we're not good enough, that humans and businesses have a finite attention span and amount of time and focus and prioritization, and there is just too much stuff. Like, this has consumed me just trying to pull even all the parts of it and a basic awareness together. I can't learn a fraction of this, and that means that presumably other people are limited and have struggles as well. So what does it take just to be a successful SEO? This is the beginner's guide on Moz. It's like the 101 de facto standard. It contains all of that. That is a lifetime of learning just on its own, from understanding robots to DNS to servers to content to marketing to psychology, yada, yada, yada. There is too much stuff there for anyone to keep up with, and that's just a tiny piece of the marketing stack, never mind PPC and social and everything else. But that's fine, because we've told ourselves that if we go to enough conferences like this, and if we've watched enough Rand Fishkin unicorns videos, we can all just kind of level up and learn more and more and more stuff. Really, really nice, except that people's skills and time and focus and prioritization and attention don't scale infinitely. This is a fallacy. Why is this a problem? Because it means we build companies really badly. So we have a bunch of channels where we hire people to work in those channels. So I need some PPC, I'm going to hire somebody who does the PPC thing. We then have how consumers behave, and we try and connect them. But because we're building our structures around motivating these people with salaries and bonuses and KPIs to do the things assigned to their channels, it doesn't line up very neatly or in a way we can really easily understand to how consumers interact with the web. So brands struggle because they're very verticalized. They're trapped in an environment where people are motivated to do the thing that works for them rather than works for the greater good. Nobody in the display marketing team has ever said, you know what, I will give half of my budget to the SEO team because I understand they can have a bigger impact on upstream brand performance. But they might, like, that's not unfeasible. But it would never happen because they each have their own individual KPIs, so nothing works and everything falls over. And it's more complicated because there's other influences. There's things like offline and mobile and apps and a dozen other areas. And it's not quite that simple. It's all disproportionate and weird because PPC gets too much attention and brands really don't care about retention and advocacy as compared to purchase. And all those relationships are really, really complicated and nobody quite understands who's influencing which consumer where, and attribution's really hard. And then tomorrow, what do I do about AMP and how does virtual reality impact awareness? And if Alexa's helping me evaluate, and companies explode. This is every company in the world. This is every company you work for. It's every agency you work for. It's everyone out there. It's a mess because we're trying to fit our channel behaviors to the way that consumers behave. Essentially, well, that's not where that's meant to fit. But yeah, essentially, you can't continue to operate like this because even if you've got super smart people and they're really agile, tomorrow there's another thing. The next day there's another 10 things. There are more platforms, there are more channels, there are more verticals. And the more you just kind of keep trying to stack people into them, that you're like racing towards the point where it all falls over. So what if we took that and pivoted it? Some of this should be familiar if you're familiar with, if you are aware of the concept of holacracy. What if we assume that there are only three things? There's demand creation, where we've got to grow awareness, demand fulfillment, where we've got to give people the stuff, and demand retention, where we've got to make them like us. And what if you structured your teams? That's not where that sits. Multidisciplinary teams across these. So you've got an SEO guy and a PPC guy and a display guy and an email guy all working on how do we acquire people rather than how do we manage our channels. You've got to KPI them differently, you've got to reward them differently, but this is the kind of way that you need to be thinking about structure in order to survive. It's no coincidence that these brands who are shit and dead did not do this, and the brands who dominate our lives are the ones who structure their teams like this, because this is what it takes to be successful. It's how you need to enable and empower your people to do good stuff. This isn't accidental. There's a really nice link, bit.ly Holacracy Plus, that explains a whole lot of the thinking behind this and actually goes through a whole lot of ammunition on how you transform. And there's a much more grown-up, sophisticated version of it that has a whole lot of like really terrifyingly sophisticated thinking on how you model people, etc. Essentially, you need to do this now because tomorrow gets more complicated, etc. Except we're all screwed because most businesses aren't designed to do this, and people generally aren't rational and invested to the degree that you need to change this. And still in this system, you're reliant on unicorns who can hold it all together. This is not a good fix. I don't know what is. Number two, assistants will use past behavior as a proxy for preference. What do I mean? Let's explore. All marketing and advertising assumes that you can interrupt or purchase my attention. All marketing and advertising. You think, I want a thing, whether it's consciously expressed or otherwise. You think, I want a thing, and the brand goes, I will buy your attention. I will show you a TV ad. I will bid on a keyword. I will put a advert on a billboard in front of you. All marketing and advertising is based on interrupting at the point of need. Essentially, let's break this down. So, consumer needs are what Google refers to as a moment. I want, I need, I want to, etc., all those things. I express intent. I go, maybe I need a new washing machine. And then the brand goes, okay, well, here's our offers on washing machines. That happens in PPC. It happens in whatever environment. It's more sophisticated. So actually, I have this moment where I go, maybe I need a new washing machine. And I go, I'm going to build a consideration set. I'm going to look at 50. I'm going to Google some stuff, and I'm going to go, maybe that one or that one. And I'll build a pool that I'm going to evaluate. I then reduce that set down. So I go, okay, that one's no good. That one's too big. That one's too expensive. And I get less. I then go, okay, I don't like that brand, that one's a bit insecure, that one's got bad reviews, and I do a final cull to the point where I've maybe got 2 or 3, and then I pick one and I buy it. In a world where I maybe instead say, hey Alexa, pick me a new washing machine, it does all of that bit. Hey Google Home, find me a restaurant to go to. Hey Google Home, what film should I watch? Hey Google Home, hey Google. It invisibly does this bit on its own. All the process where I would have been exposed to brands, where they would have had a chance to advertise to me, where I might have seen their paid search, where I might have been retargeted by them or read their blog posts or their news, all of those bits cease to exist. I say, hey Google, give me the thing, and it goes, do you want this one or this one or this one? All that process I would have gone through, where brands who aren't necessarily the best fit or aren't the cheapest, could have competed, could have bought my attention, could have bid for it, don't get the opportunity. How do you market? How do you influence the consumer consideration set when the consumer is not there? This is happening now, and nobody really has an answer. Google certainly doesn't have an answer, and they're pioneering a whole lot of the tech. Amazon has an answer because it's the only thing you can do with their kit at the moment. But we're going to very quickly enter a world where people offload their decision-making. We're already doing it with our mobile phones, with our mapping, with everything else. The ability to market to these people disappears because they are not there. And that's our entire paradigm at the moment. There isn't really a great answer. It already exists. I subscribe to a company called Flipper, who automatically analyze the gas and electricity market and change my supplier if there's a cheaper one. I will never, ever again search for or interact directly with any energy company. As a consumer, I have been removed from that market. I will never search. There will never be an opportunity to advertise to me or show me a deal or purchase my attention. All of the tactics that we have at the moment require a consumer to search or to be exposed to, in that environment, or to visit their website. I will never do that in the energy ecosystem. Mortgages, too. This isn't just commercials. This is big, scary decision-making. I've outsourced my mortgage resource to a company that does all the work for me. These aren't even AI systems. This is just good branding and consumer service. I am not a consumer in that market. You cannot advertise to me. Alexa, Google Home, all these systems will use 3 concepts to determine how they make those decisions. They won't say, yes, we've got you a new mortgage, but they will reduce the consideration set down to 2 or 3. They'll assess the availability. Is this place open? Does it exist? Is it nearby? Does it look like a valid fit for my needs? Is it suitable? And that might be a combination of price, of proximity, of review quality, those kinds of experiential factors. And what can you determine from my implied preference? Now, this is the interesting bit. Does this brand align with my Amazon Alexa or my Siri's or my Google Home's understanding of what I value and think is important? And a large part of that will be price, and is it open, and does it have at least a 4-star review? But there are more nuanced considerations. Implied preference. Systems will use past behavior, because these systems only have access to what's happened in the past. If I say, get me a new washing machine, my Alexa will go, read his emails, assess his social following, see what he did on Facebook, see if any of his friends have previously interacted with these brands. Has he got an app? Has he done a thing on LinkedIn? It will have access only to data from the past. There is no opportunity to interact or to market in the moment. You have to have marketed yesterday or 6 months ago. And it will use connected data. What's this person, what apps do I have access to? Your Google Home will be connected to all of your other accounts that your Google account is. Suddenly, these systems will be able to read all that information and help me decide. There are explicit, really easy things it can do, like, has he read an article on the website? Has he liked or shared this thing socially? Has he reviewed a previous product from this brand? That's really easy. Then consider also network actions. Are the people he's connected to, or the people he follows, or the people he respects, maybe this is a resurgence for Google+, what have their actions been? If I'm recommending a washing machine, how does his network review Bosch compared to Beko? I think that's a washing machine brand. That suddenly starts to influence the decision that this system makes. And then, really, really fascinating, lookalike action. So even if you don't have access to any of this, I'm 6 foot something, I have a cat, I'm an SEO, I'm a geek. That's a large audience of people who probably behave relatively similarly and have similar preferences. Maybe you can look at what would have been good for them where you do have some of this data and infer it and apply it to me. You don't need to have all of this hard data. You can suddenly make really good guesses as to which washing machine you should recommend to me. And again, I'm not involved in that process. You can't say, I'm going to bid more on the PPC ad, I'm going to show more display ads, I'm going to try and do paid social, because I'm not there, I'm not involved. So you need to advertise and market 6 months maybe before the person expresses a desire on your product. But that's pretty terrifying because you don't know if or when they might convert. You're talking then essentially about marketing to anybody who might ever want the thing you sell. That's a pretty big audience with a pretty big budget. And also, more than just past actions, what happens when they can monitor things like emotional preference and subconscious stuff at the moment? There's a whole bunch of brands experimenting with this. I've seen it in the wild. It's terrifying. Like when you look at a washing machine, that's a really bad example, washing machines. When you look at one, which one's more interesting, which one inspires reactions, etc. There's a really really interesting thought experiment. You can just about read it down here, saying, if I'm on a park bench and I'm next to somebody and I hear them talking about the symptoms of cancer, am I obligated to turn around and tell them they might have cancer? This is a decision that Google is making at the moment in terms of should this kind of data influence your search behavior and inputs and outputs, and that's really serious. There's a whole bunch of similar and comparable scenarios where it might choose proactively to use data that you maybe aren't aware of or haven't explicitly consented to, just because it understands in a way or at a scale or of a type of thing that you don't. Also, negative interactions in this world kill. Poor brand reviews, either by yourself or by your peers or by lookalike audiences, will immediately rule out options from that consideration set. My Google Home will never recommend a brand with a 2-star product, because why would it? So we need to get in miles before the demand exists. We need to create either explicit or implicit preference signals from an audience who might never buy, which is ridiculous, so we're screwed, because we can't access the market to do that. Most of us aren't kind of P&G scale global brands who have access to the budgets and the types of marketing that would make this possible. And because this is thoroughly impractical, like you can't say my strategy is to market to everybody with a pulse in the hope that they might buy at some point. Like it's just nobody will buy into that, nobody will give you the budget. So how do brands cope? They need to reinvent themselves to access the market. Essentially, if you're a small or a new brand, influencer marketing is your only way in, because you can achieve some of those positive signals through networked actions and recognition of celebrity faces and those kinds of endorsements that generate those kinds of explicit and implicit actions. You can buy your way into a degree by getting somebody recognizable's name and face against your brand name. That's a slide that shouldn't look like that. Don't look. Trinity Mirror are a brand in the UK who run all the local newspapers, 130-something city-level newspapers, the Manchester Gazette, for example. They went digital. They went digital really early. They understood that print was dying and they adopted the web. They lost 30% of revenue per customer, because it's a different model and it's not as easy to monetize. They saw the mobile revolution coming. They went mobile very quickly and very early. They lost 30% of revenue per customer because it's a different model. You see where this is going. They saw the app revolution coming. They went app very quickly. They lost 30%. Like, it's convenience 30 every time. They lost another 30%. They saw the syndicated content revolution coming, and they started sharing and syndicating their articles with other networks in a very sophisticated way. They lost more money. They are hemorrhaging. They know that newspapers and print are not where they want to be playing. So they did a big exploration, and they realized they only had 3 things. They had a brand name that people recognize and trust, which is essentially synonymous with marketing permission. They had a big list of emails, an audience that they could reach freely and earn an audience, and they had a sack of money. Sure, it was leaking, but they had a sack of money. So they said, why are we selling newspapers? Why don't we build a football website? Why don't we buy a casino? Why don't we explore the depths of the ocean? Like, maybe they're not doing that one, but like they had this moment of crystallization where they could decouple who they were today from what they want to be in the future by just using those assets. That's really interesting, because everybody is now starting to play this game for a whole bunch of reasons. This is Fleet Lights. This is a project by Direct Line Insurance in the UK. I'm walking down a dark road. I've got insurance with Fleet Lights. I hit the app, and then a drone comes and lights up the street. Really, really cool. Like, that makes people safer. It reduces the number of claimants on their insurance, which you would think would hurt them, but actually it makes it much more predictable, which makes them more profitable. I think the really interesting thing about this is I can't imagine another brand who could take advantage. Like, 10 years from now, they might not sell insurance. They might be the only company that has a UK-wide distributed drone fleet, because there aren't many companies in a position to launch that without a commercial model to make it work, but these guys can. This could become who Direct Line are. That's pretty interesting. You think that sounds weird? Name the company. They started off selling shoes, then they did phones, then they did maps, and now they're back to shoes. Nokia have never sold phones as their thing. That was like a blip for a couple of years. In a commodified world where stuff is cheap and platforms are fragmented and I can't market to my audience, we need to be able to pivot. We need to be able to decouple who we are from what we do. Consumers have a relationship with your brand name, the logo and the feelings it creates, and the networked effects around that. The thing you sell is readily available through 3D printing methods, delivered by Amazon, marketed on eBay and Etsy from an audience who've never been online before. All those things go away and become commodified. The thing that matters is the relationship with the brand, not the thing you sell. Yada, yada, yada. Very quickly, how am I for time? Like minus 10 minutes already? 10 minutes! Oh, this is amazing. I'll slow down. I've got 40 minutes of content now, it's good. So I think this is all very complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it changes a lot of the way that we think about marketing and brand and consumer relationships. I think surviving and succeeding this transition requires that you deliver a valuable experience, which is utter fluff. So I'm going to explore what that means. I think there is a hierarchy of brand value, where at the very basic level, a brand can fulfill a need. I'll go into what these mean. Essentially, the service you provide exists and is available when I need it, and it's not bad. Not bad, but it's like not bad. There's then a story and proposition layer where you have messaging or elements of your service which differentiate you from the competition and the other people I could have shopped with. And then the really smart brands answer to a slice of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You make me feel safe, or you give me human connection, or you reduce my fear. Those kind of primal bits of the human experience. If your brand can align to those, that's really powerful. Let's have some examples. It's actually the further down this you are, the stickier you are in a consumer's life. If you're just at the top and somebody 3D prints your product slightly cheaper than you sell it, you're gone overnight. If you're at the bottom, it doesn't really matter how much your product costs, because my relationship is with the brand, not the product. Some examples. Whiskers create the food that my cat eats. That is the extent of my relationship with them. I would change overnight if there was a cheaper one that it would eat. P&G put things I need onto shelves. If I need some bleach or some whatever cleaning products they do, that is probably the brand behind that manufactures the thing that I pick up off the shelf at the supermarket. That is the extent. I do not care who brands my washing up liquid. I have no relationship with them. But it's cheap, which is good. Fitbit makes me feel like I'm in control of my health. You see the difference? There's a part of my life now and part of a sticky relationship. Amazon's retail arm has everything that I will need without friction. I know that I can buy anything that I need and it will turn up and it will be of a relatively good price. I have implicit trust that I will not be ripped off and it will be fine. That's pretty strong. Uber, contentiously, makes my travel completely frictionless, but more importantly, it answers to part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It removes uncertainty. It removes fear. The app has nothing to do with getting a taxi. The app is wherever I am in the world, and whenever I step out of a building, I can press my phone and I can safely and promptly get to where I need to go without ever having to worry or think or stress or get lost or look at a map. That's what Uber does very well, and that's why they persist and are sticky despite all of their challenges and their obvious issues. They are sticky because they make my life safer, ironically. Amazon Prime means I already have everything I need. That's how you do sticky. And it's now less than an hour to get a thing in London, which is ridiculous. Maybe I don't need anything in 40 minutes, but my God, I already have it. I just need to click. That's phenomenal. There's an interesting question about how this plays out when the consumer's not involved. Again, remember, in many of these new scenarios, the consumer isn't exposed to these decision-making processes. Essentially, the brand represents a promise. You will get this experience. The connection between the promise and the experience is the only thing that a brand is when everything is 3D printed and commodified and available in 40 minutes and yada, 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 yada. This is what a brand is. It's the unique delivery of a brand promise, give or take. This is where you need to be thinking. Agencies. Whose agency? Hands up. Any agency people? Yes, you're all screwed. So it's me too. Every brand has this challenge where you have a relationship between cost, time, and quality. You can't have all three. If you optimize for one, you diminish against the others. Everybody knows this. Agencies have another one. Agencies also have planning, execution, comms. I can do lots of stuff, but then I won't have time to tell you what I'm doing, or I can tell you what I'm doing, but then I won't have time to plan for what I'm doing next. There's like an intrinsic dysfunction and a compromise at the heart of agency world. That means you have to play with both sets of these challenges. That gets harder and harder and harder as SEO and marketing and advertising gets more and more commodified as we start to play in this world. Is that 5 minutes or a high five or 5? Loads of time. I'm almost at the end. I think there might be some kind of magic intersect where you can plot all of your strengths and weaknesses as an agency in this. I just just can't quite work out what it is. But it's very worth being aware that if you're in the agency space, you need to be conscious of where you are plotted on these diagrams and start to build up strengths to counterbalance it. Like, you can overcome some of this with good tech or processes or better people or those kinds of things, but this is going to get harder and harder to optimize for. So we're screwed because no brand wants to do this because they're driven by old, opinionated stakeholders. Agencies can't play very easily in this world because they're driven by compromise. And nobody really wants to say, hey, maybe we should stop selling newspapers because that's how you get fired. Very quickly then, this is all very nice, but essentially everything I've said so far is irrelevant because we're all, it's the end of the world, end of society, and the end of capitalism. Very recently, Adidas started following the chain, so the first part of the story is Chinese supermarket manufacturing shoes replaced almost all of its workers with robots, automated manufacturing lines, and massively increased output and increased quality, reduced waste, etc. That's not a surprise. What's particularly interesting is bits of Adidas are following suit and doing the same thing. When we live in an economy where all commoditized stuff, cat food, shoes, etc., are essentially the same price because they're all manufactured and 3D printed and locally available, you've really got to nail the brand thing, otherwise how do you stand out? For us as individuals, JP Morgan is a big law firm. They released a piece of AI, a machine learning system that took what it had been taking a team of lawyers 360,000 man-hours a year to do and did it in 6 minutes. These are smart, educated, sophisticated, highly paid people. They're just pattern matching. What is SEO and digital marketing if not just pattern matching? Analyze my competitors, pick some keywords, look at the strengths and weaknesses, fix my broken website, build an AMP page, don't build an AMP page. These are just patterns. Pretty scary. And it's not just pattern matching. There's a whole bunch of companies. Kindred AI is really interesting. They are building AI and machine learning systems which are trained, at least in part, with the physicality of humans. They're trying to reach trying to shortcut general artificial intelligence by baking machine learning systems into physical bodies in the hope that there's some kind of emergence thing. That's really terrifying. Who's played GeoGuessr? Where you have to work out where you're one person, excellent. It plonks you on a Google Maps screen and you have to work out where you are just by looking around. You look at things like street signs and landmarks and you go, I think I'm somewhere in South California, and it says you're actually over on the other side of the world. There's a machine learning piece of kit that plays it better than you can without any landmarks. This is really interesting. There's 360-something geosynchronous satellites taking photos of the Earth every hour. You show it a photo of anywhere on the planet, and it extrapolates from all the other photos it's seen and finds out where it is. Without recognizing the picture of the Eiffel Tower, knows it's in France. That's not just a larger scale of thinking. It's not just throwing lots of images and data at a machine learning process and saying, work out where you are. It's a different direction of thinking. It's a thinking that we can't comprehend. These kinds of systems will wipe the floor with us. Thinking of which, and wrapping up, this scared me quite a lot, so I went and I spent a lot of time building a Chrome extension which would evaluate people's LinkedIn profiles and try and score them on their propensity to survive. It color codes them based on red are skills which I think will be wiped out by these kinds of revolutions, which go from basic things like keyword research and web design and analytics and search engine marketing and customer relationship management. All of these things are things that systems and machines can do better. And then maybe there are some skills which are a bit contentious, some that were never skills in the first place, and then some green ones which might be useful for in the future. You can Google Jono Alderson, I should put LinkedIn, Google Jono Alderson, Chrome extension, LinkedIn, you'll find it's really interesting to run on your own. You get a score that suggests how well you're going to do in this new ecosystem. So I think it's maybe time to panic. I don't have an answer for any of this. This is still stuff that I'm thinking about, that a lot of other people are thinking about. Google do not have a solution to this new environment. Nobody does. It's already scary. I think if we had a lot more time, we could talk about all sorts of stuff like the socio-political implications, how universal income and VR and Facebook's move into making people prisoners in their home is quite interesting, yada, yada, yada. In the meantime, 5 tips. Take stock. Think about all of this, have a look through some of the sources I've linked to in this, go and explore, understand where you're positioned as things become commodified, as the way and places in which people consume content and products changes, the way the market changes. Be ready to take advantage of shifting opportunities and pivot your brand and your products, etc. Unlearn all the bad habits that you have. Stop thinking about channels, stop thinking about buying cycles, and stop thinking about funnels. None of these things exist in their current form anymore, and just start thinking about the relationship between consumers and brands as entities. optimized to be able to pivot your platforms. And like all of this is really, really hard, which is why not many brands do it, but you've got to be able to pivot technically and strategically and in terms of what you sell. You can cheat a little bit and build partnerships with other brands. So if I was Domino's Pizza and I was trying to displace an incumbent pizza vendor through Amazon Alexa, Siri, etc., the way in might be to partner with Netflix and do joint offers and gain access to other people's marketing lists and people. That's an interesting angle and one you can solve very easily with big pots of money. And learn to love the machine, because this is essentially, this is not the future, this is tomorrow, this is imminent, this is already out there, it's already replacing people's jobs, it's already taking large swathes of what we think is smart work and automating it. You need to be ready to pivot yourself, as well as the companies you need to work for, and work out what you're going to do about it. But most of all, think happy thoughts. Thank you very much. Whew. That was fast.